Hello, everybody. Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
And this is number 46, isn't it?
It's
Number 46. And it's been an odd week in some ways. A lot of people I've talked to have asked me if we watched the funeral service.
Well, it was such a huge
service.
thing, wasn't it, last Saturday? Very full of pomp and glory and old Britain and... But of course, in the middle of all that extraordinary ceremony and the sound and the quality, sat one very lonely old lady who just lost her husband. And I think that photo of the Queen sitting in the choir stalls with a mask on, totally alone. I mean, you think of the funerals we've been to, Adrian, where there's been propped up, we've been to funerals of our family and where you prop up the person who's bereaved and you stay close to them and you hold them by your love. And there she was. It was an extraordinary moment.
Yeah. I mean, who knows how she felt? Maybe she preferred it like that. But it was a very poignant picture of what it actually is to be the Queen, is just to be who you are.
And the Queen to be in the middle of the COVID pandemic as well.
Someone who's lost someone they love.
Yeah.
But it did make me think of other images, and I know it did you too, over the
images that have become almost iconic of a period.
Well, maybe they have. I know they have for us. I mean, the soldier holding the refugee child. Remember that one?
2-year-old, of course I do, who drowned.
Yeah, and the soldier all done up in his uniform and actually holding the body very tenderly, really.
Yes, I mean that symbolised the cost of trying to escape a country where in trying to look for a better life, didn't it? And then there was the guy, of course, in Tiananmen Square, standing there with his shopping bags facing the tanks.
They call him the Tank Man. I didn't realise that.
I think they do. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't think it's quite good enough, really.
I think it's right, and I think watching that slender little figure making those great big tanks move to left and right was one of the most eloquent symbols I've ever seen. I've no idea what happened to him. I'd love to know what
I think we can actually find that out. I think there's quite a lot of info about him. But there was a picture far more anonymous than that and far less well known that moved you beyond almost any other picture.
Well, it was a picture of a refugee family, and you couldn't quite make out who was which in it, but there was a boy standing, and in his eyes was a look of such pain and anger and fear, and he had his head on the hand of, I assume, was a very, very small brother or sister, and there were others sitting round in that group, and you could feel it was palpable, the panic and fear and pain of those
and responsibility
people as they
because he was looking
tried
after
to deal with what was happening to them. Yes. His face reminded me of one of our children at odd times when they took responsibility for the others. Very, very moving.
I was talking to Kate, our daughter, about this and saying what picture out of this pandemic do you remember? And I was really interested because the one that really affected her was right at the very beginning, and it was an image that appeared in a lot of the papers, and it was a really quite elderly man who'd obviously been sent by his wife to the supermarket to buy the shopping for the week, and he's standing there peering at his shopping list while every rack of that supermarket was empty because all the stuff had been taken. And his bewilderment, again, his sort of responsibility of doing the shopping and unable to buy anything, it kind of summed up those early months where maybe people weren't quite the best in taking stuff. And
they re-showed a little film of I think it's a nurse, where right back near the first lockdown, weeping into the camera and saying, I've just worked 24 hours or something, I can't remember, and there's nothing in the shops. Please stop it. But every single time it happens, people rush out.
But of course, all through this, there have been photos taken that just show the heroism as well of so many people and the generosity and things. These pictures are something that are definitely going to last, and we're going to look at again and again and again and remember. And I think we'll remember that picture of the Queen as well.
I also remembered photos of people who survived the Titanic in a book we had when I was a boy, and the shadow, the heavy shadow of that event stayed with me all my life. The more you think about these things, I mean, in my house, there were several old pictures in the attic, and we took the backs off just to see what was behind them.
Did you think you might find a valuable masterpiece?
No, I don't think I did. What I did find was an absolute shock. One of the most shocking things I've experienced, because the back thing came off, and I turned it round, and there was a photograph of my father and his first wife, who I've never seen.
You knew about?
I knew about, yes, but they were sitting there, and the thing about the picture of him was that he was quite spivvy. He'd obviously spent some money on things to make him look smart in the photo, and he was sitting next to her, and it was very, very strange seeing two people from the past, one of whom I hadn't known then, the other I'd never known, staring straight at me, and that really gave me a bit of a turn. Contrarily, my mother's father, who I never met, my grandfather, looked an absolutely wonderful man. He looked so loving, and my mum, as you know, loved him, and I never met him. He was a builder and a preacher, and he had those kind eyes that I love in people. I
bet you really looked at it and yearned to meet him.
I really would love to have met him. Yeah, and I hope I will someday.
Because interestingly, and this is so different really, but if we're talking about pictures, you know, when my dad, who got into his 90s and he had dementia, as you know, he was confused a lot of the time, and I made a book for him of his whole life, because I knew that he was losing his memories, and we captured every single little story he still had, and I put together these pictures. And talking about meeting him, I think he met himself.
Yes,
you know,
he did.
I think, and I think that's why these books of pictures and stories of life have become so important in places like homes for people with dementia.
Absolutely.
Being able to say, this was you.
It was quite a production, that book, wasn't it? Quite big. By the way, just while we're talking about pictures, you may not want to tell people about this, but just tell people what happened when you took the boys to try to get a photo of Nigel Mansell.
Well, I don't really want to, Adrian.
Oh, go on.
Well, okay. Well, all right then. I queued up for a long time because the boys were really
keen. Nigel Mansell was a racing driver, by the way.
Yes, and none of us were particularly into motor racing, but he was a famous person, and there he was in this shopping mall, and I was able to go with my camera, and the aim was to take a picture of him, and I queued for ages. And when I finally got up, I really don't want to say this, Adrian, when I finally got up in front of him, my camera, I couldn't make it work, and he was in a great hurry. And he took the camera from me as I fiddled with it, took a picture of me, and signed the book and moved me on.
This really amuses me that the only thing we have from that attempt to get a photo is a photo of you taken by the person who you wanted a photo of.
Yes, looking absolutely mortified.
Yes, I always enjoy that story. Anyway. What else have you thought about?
Okay, well, the other thing I've thought about is that how interesting and difficult it is when you want to create a story from a picture, and the person who's having the picture taken is seeing it in a different way. And what I'm thinking about is when we went to meet our sponsor child, who with World Vision, Shahnaj in Bangladesh, and the idea was to take pictures to relate the story. We were going to do a tour when we came back, weren't we, in order to raise awareness of child sponsorship and what a difference it made. And what I think nobody, including the photographer, had taken into consideration was that Shahnaz may have been living in one of the worst slums. She was 11
years old, wasn't she?
She may have been living in one of the worst slums in a terrible, terrible living conditions. But she was a normal little girl.
She was, yeah.
And
absolutely.
I had taken a little jacket that my daughter had grown out of, who was the same age, but I think a bit bigger because she would have been stronger. And Shahnaz was really taken with this. And when it came time for her photo and the photographer wanted a picture of a child in abject poverty, which she was, in order to show the need to sponsor children, this beaming little girl kept appearing wearing her brother's jeans and this little jacket and had to be sent off again.
Yeah.
But the other thing I remember, Adrian, talking about other people's stories, is that they wanted her to have a picture in her school uniform. And her mother was hunting for it, and it was in the bottom of the dirty clothes basket thing that she had there. And the pain in her face, because she wanted her little girl to look her best.
Yeah.
And the photographer wanted her to look her worst. And I thought, that's really interesting, because it was true that she was poor, but it was also true that she was a normal little girl, and that her mum was a normal mum.
They were a very functional family. They could have moved into a house in England and got used to it very quickly. They really loved each other. Yeah, I had one odd thought. You know, I'm always been interested in the story of Oscar Wilde and what happened with him, and I've often wished I could hear a recording of his voice. Now, as far as I'm aware, I don't know if there is one. But I would be so interested to hear his voice. And I went on from there to wonder how it would have affected, or would affect, Jesus' cred, his general cred, if a photo of him was found. Now, obviously, a photo of him isn't going to be found.
No.
But equally, obviously, if the camera had been invented in those days, there could be a picture of him. And I imagined, I just let my mind wander at the idea that this photo emerges and people are peering at his features, and someone says, well, he reminds me of my Uncle George. Don't look much like the Son of God to me. Thought he'd be better looking. Or maybe I used to know a bloke who looked just like that. I didn't like him much. I mean, there's a very odd feeling about the specificity, if that's a word, the specific nature of a face that is his face. We've had faces all down the generations being painted and drawn, but it's a very strange thought.
But the great thing is, of course, because there isn't a photo, and I'm actually really glad that maybe that's why God decided to send Jesus then. Maybe that's why Jesus decided to come to earth then, that there weren't cameras, there wasn't social media, and there weren't quite a few other things. Because actually, if you think about painting all over the world, Jesus looks like the African. He looks like whoever it is, because people see him in their image. And that is absolutely a positive. The only thing is that I do think, and the more I think about the fact that his life, his death, his resurrection, all the stuff it acts, this is history. Yes, it is.
The plan to save people, if it's true, is a history. And therefore, anyway, I just thought it was interesting.
But you say, you know, how it would be, people would look at it and they would put their own interpretation on it. And I'm so glad, going right back to what we began talking about, the funeral, I was actually really pleased that it was so dark in the chapel.
Yeah, I know why you think that.
Because I know that everybody was looking to see the expression on the faces of Harry and William. And I know that they would have had body language experts deciding interpreting exactly what they were thinking and feeling. And I thought at least we were saved that, really.
Yeah,
because
I was pleased about that,
you can think anything into a picture, you know, and I can think of some terrible pictures. And in fairness to you, darling, you don't take a very jolly picture, do you, quite often?
I'm the most miserable git in the world in my photographs.
But you're not a miserable person.
No,
but
I'm
it
not
just
at all.
means that sometimes it is true to say that the way you look in your picture isn't necessarily showing how much you're enjoying the event.
I think it's true to say in every way I don't look like the person enjoying the event. I was also thinking, this is a very odd thing to say, but the reality of Jesus as a historical figure.
Right.
When I was a boy, and in our house we had, because my father's first wife had been a Catholic, and he became a Catholic also, there were those little pictures of saints, of Jesus rather, on little cards that you find sometimes. So you'd have a picture of Jesus with his heart hanging out, you know, one of those ones with blood, the Sacred Heart and all that stuff. And I thought about the sacredness of his blood a lot when I was a boy. And I imagined, because I didn't know things evaporated and disappeared, I thought if someone had collected some of that blood and they'd put it in a bowl and they'd passed it down the generations, I could have next to my bed a bowl with some of Jesus' blood in it, and it would be real, and it would be a significant indication that he was a historical figure.
You were an unusual child, I think, Adrian.
I felt things very strongly, and
Yeah.
I tried to think through things a great deal. Anyway,
well, of course, for me,
strange.
going to I was not a Catholic, but I went to a Catholic primary school where there was a chapel which we could go into in break times and lunch times, and you know, we talk about these images and the colour, the richness of those paintings, which I don't need now. Maybe I didn't need then, but for a very imaginative, feely sort of child, they did all sorts of things to me, and I think they created a sense of mystery and magic and otherness that it's very hard to quite capture somewhere else.
True.
And whether they're right or whether they're wrong, they did a lot for me, really, when I was little.
So much stuff arisen out of this. So I was looking back to Hosea, which some years ago I wrote some Bible notes on Hosea. And I remembered, and I found it. You found the book, didn't you? The book it was in. And it was, I was saying in the book that in Hosea, at one point it sounds like God kind of flicking through a photo album.
Really?
As about the Israelites. I'll read you this bit that says here. When Israel was a child, I loved him, and out of Egypt I called my son. But the more they were called, the more they went away from me. They sacrificed to the Baals, and they burned incense to images. It was I who taught Ephraim to walk, taking them by the arms, but they did not realize it was I who healed them. I led them with cords of human kindness, with ties of love. To them, I was like one who lifts a little child to the cheek, and I bent down to feed them. I sometimes think when I read something like that we really don't understand half of it.
What do you mean, half of?
The passion and the reality of what is driving this plan that we keep talking about for Jesus to come and do his stuff. Perhaps we will one day.
Yeah, so if we could have one photo of a moment in the life of Jesus, what would you like it to be?
That's a good question.
And we'd love, anybody listening to this, we'd love to hear.
Yes, it'd be interesting. Well, I think a family picture of Mary and Joseph with Jesus would be nice. As a boy.
Yes, there's loads of paintings that represent that, but
No,
I don't think he looks
photos.
like a real boy. If I wanted it, I'd want to see his knees. I'd want to see whether he had climbed any trees.
That's true.
Or whether he'd got muddy, because I'm sure he jolly well did.
And the Transfiguration up on the mountain.
Oh, okay.
I think if Peter had a camera at the time, he might have taken a picture Isaiah and it wasn't Isaiah, was it Elijah and whoever it was, and Jesus shining white. It'd be nice to have had a little pic of that. What else?
I'd like the homely ones, really. I think, I think I'd like to see him. Yeah, just sitting around, really. I mean, they're the snaps. I do hope, all the sort of Instagram type photos where everybody is sitting perfectly normally until the camera's there. Yeah. Somebody lifts up their phone and everybody goes, way, and does jazz hands and looks as though they're having an amazing time. Well, I don't quite think that might have happened, but it would be quite fun, the equivalent, of seeing something pointing at them, just to show just how really happy they are.
What about Mary and Martha and Lazarus and Jesus?
Yeah, well, that's the sort of thing.
The photographer saying, "Come on, Jesus, give us a smile. I know things are tough at the moment, but give us a smile."
Yeah.
And I don't know. What about the Last Supper? Got all disciples lining up for a snap, and Judas in the line.
I don't really. I don't think I really want to see that, really. Because I think everybody would be peering at the faces to think, well, of course we would know now, but if it had been taken at the time, it would have been which one looks the most like the person who's going to betray him, and all sorts of body language experts would be brought in.
All right, here's the last question then, Paul. One question, but what's the expression on Jesus' face when he appears suddenly in the room when he's resurrected to the disciples? Would you be smiling, frowning? Would you look excited?
Well, our friend who wrote to us last week was saying that she thought he would be very excited because he was coming back and very happy. Yeah. Well, we're a bit excited, aren't we, Adrian? Because at last we're going to actually start doing one or two live things, aren't we? And
yes, we are. Yeah.
It's pretty amazing as we come to sort of normal, a little bit more normal. And we're going to be at Thornley Hotel at the end of May, aren't we? And it will be like an adventure.
And where is Thornley Hotel?
Grange over Sands. But it'll be a real adventure because and maybe we'll take some pictures.
Well, we'd love to see people there. I think there's still a few places left at the venue. And do you know the dates?
Well, that doesn't matter. They can look it up. I think it's the 24th to 28th. Yeah. But
it's going to be so odd to be standing in front of a group of people.
Yes.
But we are looking forward
and not in a little box peering at people. So, but we would really love to hear any ideas that you have of which picture you would like to see. Yeah. We'll speak to you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.